Hello guys, today we're going to be looking at two options or parameters that every single poser user should know how to use. One is show hidden and the other is force limits. So let's take a look at this object here. This is a coffin, and if I grab the lid here, you'll see that there's a parameter here called open, and if I turn it, you'll see straight away that lid is going into the body, and if I go the other way, it can just keep on rotating infinitely. Neither of those is very realistic. The designer has obviously created a pivot point on this edge, but then the lid is free to turn where it wants. So if I go up to here to figure, in the figure menu, you'll see here that there's an option called use limits. If I select that and now rotate the lid, okay, so you'll see I can open it, but when I close it, it can't go any further than 0. But the stupid thing here is that they've done an asymmetrical limit because I can continue to open it that way, and now when I close it, I have to go back to 0. So if I go to here and then that little triangle and go to settings and force limits, you'll see that they've done a maximum limit, that's the close, of 0, but the minimum limit is minus 36,000 rotations. So what they should have done is taken the lid here, opened it down to the ground roughly, so roughly there. So what's that? Minus 208. I'm going to copy that value, and now I'm going to go back into force limits, into the settings. So there you are. The current value is 208 minus 208, and now if I put that in there and do OK, now when I do open in each direction, you see that it can't go any further than that, and so that's force limits here. But here's an interesting thing. So I'm going to turn use limits off, and now that just rotates as it did before, but I can do a per object basis as well. So if I go settings here and do force limits, that will override the global settings. So here now that has limits on it, but if I grab La Femme's arm and we do up and down, you'll see that there are no limits on her arm. So now if I do use limits here, you'll see that her arm can't go any further than that. And this figure is a classic example of why you might have limits. For example, you might have limits on her legs so that they can't go unrealistically wide here. So she's doing the splits. That's got kinematics on by the fields of it. Yep. Okay. So she's doing the splits here, but that's how far they think the human body should do the splits. Now, with this arm, that's as far up as that arm can go with limits on, and that's not realistic. Supposing she was hanging from a rope doing an exercise, you want that arm to be able to go almost into her head. So what I might do here is turn the limits off, and by default, Poser now has limits turned off, which is much more useful. And I'm going to grab that, and now I can go all the way up to a hanging position. Now, excuse me, there is one more limits situation that I'd like to show you. On this easel and painting, the shelf height that controls the painting is limited here within the prop itself, but there is an interesting feature which I've seen, and perhaps you guys know why it does it, because I certainly don't. In this one, force limits is grayed out. So you can't override. I could understand there are some props where if you go beyond the limits, as we did with this figure here, that vertical position looks fine. But if I go here, now that's starting to deform in a undesirable way. There's never a situation where you'd want that to be able to do that unless you were doing some weird kind of horror movie. So I could understand forcing the limits to a certain amount, but I've never understood why it has this grayed out option here. So if you know the answer to that and how to override that, I'd appreciate that. Now, there's one more situation that I want to show you. Let's look at this lid. Now, supposing, let's take that closed, and we'll just zoom in a little bit. Supposing for some reason I want to lift this lid off, supposing I've got two people maybe lifting the lid. How can I do that? There's no option to lift the lid. And the reason for that, let me get a leg out of the way. The reason for that is because some parameters are hidden, and you'll find this very frequently. For example, on La Femme's head, probably the parameter to lift her head in Y, which would be vertical, and you have to be careful here because the directions are relative to the parent figure. So you'll see here there's no way to lift her head vertically. So what we do is we go up to this parameter here, this triangle here, click on there, and there's an option called show hidden parameters. And you'll see now with this lid, I can now lift the lid up and down as well, because these extra X, Y, and Z and scale parameters have appeared. If I go back and turn that back off, you'll see those parameters have disappeared. So what this parameter is actually a rotation parameter. Right, so I'll just take that back to, oh no I won't, I'll leave that where it is. If I do show hidden again, you'll see that you've got this here is just a renamed Z rotate. So here's Y rotate, and if I just click on that, I can go into properties, and I can rename, sorry, not properties, settings, and I can rename that parameter to flip or something like that. Okay, but that parameter is not visible on the average person on the average person setting. So what I'd do here is unhide that, and now when I do show hidden off, you'll now see I've got a flip parameter as well as the open parameter, and you can switch the visibility on and off. So that's usually used by creators when they want to hide parameters that would actually break the model. So for example, if I go back to here and I do show hidden and I grab her head, and now I extend that, see that neck is you know, it's mutating basically. So what they do is they hide these additional parameters that would go outside of the realms of normal figure movement. So there you go, guys. Hopefully you found that useful, and I will speak to you again soon.